Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a comparison video on a vintage fragrance, and this is what I call true niche head content. Niche head, frag head content. This is true frag head content because we're basically comparing two iterations of the same fragrance, different distributors. That's the exact kind of stuff I'm into. So first of all, let me just say something. Number one is that I understand that I don't have a catchy name. I don't have a name like Handsome Smellicus or Gens Centaurus or anything like that. It's just Ramsey, right? And so the people who are going to be drawn to my channel are maybe the ones that are not, newbies, or if you are a newbie, you're going to get a crash course, a true education on perfume, the history of perfume, stuff like that. So that's the first thing. So the people who are going to watch this are going to be a little bit more mature in their understanding of fragrances and stuff like that. But the reason I decided to do this today is I saw a video, and I've been kind of getting ready for this video for a while. I saw a video yesterday from somebody who compared this fragrance to Roja's Apex. Now, I've never smelled Apex. Roja didn't send me any free bottles, probably out of fear for what I would say. And this is Bijan Man. Now, this is the current version. You can see it doesn't have a cap because this is a tester. The current version is distributed by a fragrance company called 5 Star Fragrance Company. You can see right there at the top, 5 Star Fragrance Company. Now, if anyone else has ever heard of 5 Star Fragrance Company, do let me know, because I have never heard of them. I don't know if this is kind of the only thing that they now do, or if they have other fragrances or what. But this is a vintage bottle that I got from Anuj. As you can see, it has a cap. It says Eau de Toilette on the back right here, whereas the modern version does not. And this is distributed by Bijan Fragrances, Inc., distributed Beverly Hills Company. Now, so there's something that I want to say about this version, because this is the older version. But I don't know if it's the original, because this fragrance came out in 1981, and then it was re-released in 1987, and in 1988 it won the Fifi Award for Best Masculine Fragrance of the Year, which I believe the award is given by the Fragrance Foundation. And so if you look, this is the box. This is the vintage box. And if you watched my unboxing that I did from Enchante, go watch that video if you haven't. You'll notice that I took this box apart. So you can see this right here comes out like so, and it opens up this way. And then you can see the Bijan is almost like cut out. So you can't open the box without actually opening this piece right here. And then the box opens up inside, like so, right? And it says Bijan all inside. Kind of a cool little setup. Now, if you go watch other reviewers or other channels unbox this, they just take off the cellophane and they open it from here, which you can't do with the vintage. If they're just opening it from here, they're talking about the 5 Star Fragrances version. I also have a decant of the vintage that was Bijan Fragrances, Inc., but this is also distributed by Beverly Hills. So my guess is the original Bijan Fragrances that doesn't say distributed by Beverly Hills, I'm guessing there was a first version, there was a second version, which is the vintage that I have from Anuj, and then now we're on to the third version. So I'm doing a comparison video. So let me just read you a little bit. You can see the shorter ingredient list on the vintage box too, if you care. Actually, really cool packaging. Let me tell you about Bijan the brand, the man behind it real quick, and then we'll get into the individual fragrance. So Bijan is basically a fashion and fragrance company, and this is per Parfumo, with an oriental personality. So the brand was founded by designer Bijan Pakzad, Pakzad. Now, Mr. Pakzad was born in Iran, in Tehran, in 1940. So his wealthy family provided him with a first-class education in Italy and Switzerland, and then Bijan, so that was actually his name, then immediately began creating his first menswear pieces, which he sold in his boutique in Tehran. So he had a boutique in Tehran. He moved to Los Angeles in 1973, and he immediately recognized the need for exclusive menswear collections, especially in the business sector. So that's the reason why he opened his first American boutique in 1976 on a busy shopping street in the city, followed by more store openings in New York. So you can see right here, you've got Beverly Hills, you've got New York, and then you have London. Now, due to the luxurious character of his collections, clothes, shoes, caps, purses, fragrance, ties, etc., Bijan also has niche clientele. These include, according to Bijan Pakzad's information, celebrities, royalty, presidents, international artists. So rumor is Ronald Reagan wore this scent. Rumor is Arnold Schwarzenegger wore this scent back in the day. They were their scent of the day in the 80s. And you have to think, any fragrance that won the Fifi Men's, the Fragrance Foundation Men's Fragrance of the Year was a big deal. It was a big deal in the 1980s. And I always, I like to do these comparison videos for you guys because I'm a big believer in the differences in distributors. When one distributor takes over and another distributor starts, putting a fragrance out or making a fragrance, there are reformulations. There are differences in the ingredient level of one distributor versus another. There are different processes. There could be reformulations. So I'm a big believer in going for the vintage juice. And if you go for the vintage juice, if it was stored properly, you're not getting, like this one, the current version is an approximation of the previous scent. This is their modern take, and I will tell you, these are very different fragrances in the first hour, 2 hours. Very, very different. I'm always worried about doing these comparison videos. Well, because first of all, I only wear one scent all day, right? I don't mix and match. I don't layer. I never wear more than one fragrance, except for right before I go to bed, an hour or so before. Sometimes I'll spray something else on a part of my arm that I don't have any fragrance to just kind of test it and give my nose something different, for the day. But then I go to sleep and wash it off. And so my scent of the day is my scent of the day. I like wearing one thing, I like wearing one fragrance, and that's my fragrance of the day. I'm always leery about these comparison videos because I have to wear two fragrances, and sometimes they are very different, and these actually are very different. Even though you can kind of get the same vibe, they're very different fragrances, and I'll get into the details in a minute. But I always worry about putting a fragrance on, and I'm worried about doing a comparison video like this and spraying one on one hand, one on the other hand, which is what I do. And then what if I can't pick out the differences? What if, my nose isn't good enough to detect the differences? What if I don't have the vocabulary to share the differences with you guys? So these videos always kind of scare me because it's like a one-day thing. I do the comparison, I tell you about it. I have nothing to worry about on these because there are vast differences in the vintage and the current juice. Now, with all that being said, I have to say something else, and that's that I love vintage fragrances, and while I'll go into the reasons why once we get into the comparison, the review, if you will, but the modern formulation, while it doesn't do what the vintage does, I still like. I like the modern formulation here. And that speaks, I think, to some of these smaller houses like this 5-star fragrances that maybe this is all they do. They focus on this, they pump it out. It is a good fragrance, but it's missing some of the things you would expect it to be missing. So let's talk about some of the pros and the cons and the differences in the two fragrances. Now, by the way, this is a cheapie, okay? This is a fragrance that if you want to go buy this modern one, I think I got this tester. This is a 2.5 ounce. This is a 75 ml. I got this tester bottle for $19 or something. It was very cheap, under 20 bucks. That's a lot of juice, 75 ml for $20. Now this one I had to pay a little bit more for because it's the vintage, but still, Anuj at Enchanté Perfumes has more of these. If you're interested, go grab one, because I will tell you right now, this is a fantastic fragrance. If you have fragrance taste like I do, go check this fragrance out. So let's talk about the let's talk about kind of the differences. Before I do, let's talk about the notes. So the notes, it depends on who you look at. Parfumo only has a couple notes, 3 or 4. Fragrantica has a ton of notes listed. So here's what Fragrantica says. And this is in the top, which is very strange. The top is oak moss, sage, musk. Now, those 3 notes in the top, there's more notes in the top too, but those 3 specifically are, you know, sage is usually a top note, but oak moss and musk are 2 notes you usually do not find in the top. Those are usually notes that are used in the base. Now, there's also musk in the base of this fragrance, but the musk is there from the very beginning, along with a huge dose of oak moss. The oak moss in this, in the vintage, is gigantic. It's enormous. It is very green, very aromatic, and very in your face. That sage, there's also a lot of lavender in this fragrance, but the lavender is very well masked behind all these other notes. There's lemon, and bergamot, and orange, so there's citruses that combine in the opening, which is expected, but there's also fruity notes. And the fruitiness, I will tell you that basically when you spray the fragrances side by side, it's very easy to tell the difference. You could blindfold me and I would be able to pick out the vintage versus the new just like that. Because what you get in the opening of the vintage, which is on my right hand, versus the current version, which is on my left hand, is the opening opens up very green with a lot of depth. And it's almost like you're smelling this mega dose of oak moss with mint and anise, which is not listed, and tobacco, which is not listed, and almost like this cardamom artemisia mixture. So none of those notes are listed. Cardamom's not listed, artemisia is not listed, anise is not listed, mint is not listed, and tobacco is not listed. But imagine the vibe that that would give you if you were smelling something like that in the opening. Huge dose of oak moss, huge oak moss. Something that most modern noses are not probably used to. Now, the modern version opens up much cleaner. You get none of that dirty greenness. The dirty greenness in the vintage almost gives you the vibe of, do you know, if you've watched some of my other reviews, you know that I've said that Yatagan from the House of Chiron, the vintages, has this almost like leaves that have fallen off of a tree and have sat on the forest floor for months and months on end. Nothing has disturbed it. And then you come along and kick the leaves up and bring out that smell, that almost like forest floor rotting smell, that was that decomposition that was starting to kind of form. You get a little bit of that very almost vegetal. That's a good word for it, vegetal. You almost get this vegetal vibe in the vintage. And it's very rooty. It smells like you took if you've ever like pulled a carrot out of the ground or something, and the ground is not wet, it's dry, and you get that almost like dust of earth pop up into the air. That's almost what the opening smells like. Very oak moss heavy, very rooty, very vegetal, almost forest floor smell. You get none of that in the modern. The Modern opens up very clean, so it feels like they did a couple things. Number one, the Modern is substantially sweeter. Substantially sweeter. This has very little sweetness in it, the Vintage. The Modern has a lot of sweetness to it. But, and if you know me, you're going to say, he's not going to like it because I don't like sweet fragrances. But I like this because what they did is they used honey and amber to help sweeten it up. So the honey adds this honeyed sweetness to it. And you know, honey is one of my favorite notes of all time. Boss Number 1 is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. And when I do my top 100, you'll see just how high Boss Number 1 really is. I love honey. Honey is one of my favorite notes. And this has this increased honey, amped up honey, an ambery feel, and maybe even amped up lavender. What is toned down is all the other things I mentioned. There's almost no oak moss in this, at least to my nose, at least when you compare it to the Vintage. The Vintage is heavy oak moss, and the Modern is much sweeter with almost no oak moss, almost no green elements, almost no dirty forest floor. You don't get any of that. You just get this beautiful honeyed, sweet, cinnamon, maybe some iris, you know, and maybe some florals. Oh, there's definitely florals. The florals are, I think, what they use to help round it out. So they realized that they had to tone down certain things. Like here, for example, one of the notes that really sticks out in a side-by-side comparison is the Vintage has a very heavy clove. The clove is extremely prevalent in the Vintage. It really, if I do a this is not a top 10 clove fragrances, this would be on the list most definitely, along with fragrances like Bracken Man and stuff like that, you know, YSL's Opium. They have heavy clove as well. This one has no clove. So think about all the challenging elements are almost brought down. That's why when I see these other reviewers, that's why I started out with the box. Because when I see these other reviewers just open up the box, the Modern box, not the one that opens up this way, not the Vintage, but the Modern box, and pull out this bottle that's 5-star fragrances and go, oh my God, it's an oak moss bomb, and it is so 80s and so hard to wear. That's bull. That's complete bull. This is easy to wear for the Modern. The Modern is easy to wear. There's no oak moss. There's no musk. They amped up, there's no clove. There is musk. I feel like they amped up the musk. They amped up the honey. They amped up the cinnamon. They amped up the benzoin and the vanilla and the tonka and the easier notes. They toned down the leather. They toned down the clove. They toned down the oak moss and all that good stuff. And so what you're left with is you're left with this clean, honeyed, ambery, maybe a little bit of sandalwood to round everything out. Definite sandalwood, or some sort of wood, this woody sandalwood cedar thing. I don't know exactly, but maybe even a little bit of carnation, which is an old school note. But to pull out the Modern bottle and say, oh, you can't wear this to work, or you can't wear this to an event because people will, you know, people's noses aren't used to 80s fragrances. This is not an 80s fragrance, the Modern. This is a very modern interpretation of an 80s fragrance. This will put hair on your chest. This will make you stand out. This will make people go, what is that, you know, ting? What is that twang in the fragrance you're wearing? Because they're not used to the effect oak moss gives on a fragrance. People nowadays aren't used to it because it's so regulated, and it has been for about a decade. So you want to make a statement, forget about the Modern. I mean, I like the Modern. I could easily wear this because it gives me that honeyed feel that I like. This fruity, floral, honey, musk, you know, kind of feel. This is an easy wear. You could wear this anywhere, anytime. This could easily be a signature scent, but you're not going to offend anyone with this. This is not a statement maker to me. This, the vintage, is a statement maker. This is when you want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, you want to be Ronald Reagan. You want to be the boss. You want to make a statement. You want people to pay attention when you walk in the room. You know, you want people to just realize that you're here and they're here and you're the boss. And what you say goes. That's what this fragrance is for me. This is not something you wear to go out and pick up girls nowadays. I don't think they would be into this. This is too old school for that. But as far as a pure statement maker, the vintage is amazing. And it's interesting that I like both, because normally, you know, normally I am very tough on modern fragrances. So for me to say that, yes, there's differences, but I feel like this could be used in one situation, this could be used in another, and they're almost like a Swiss Army knife, that really says something about, you know, what they did with this fragrance. Now, there is sweetness, like I said, which normally turns me off, but that aromatic, floral, honeyed, I love honey. Oh, one last thing that I want to get out while I remember it is there's patchouli in this fragrance as well. You don't pick up it's not that you don't pick it up, but I feel like what they did in the modern, and it's actually a really smart thing for them to do. I was looking to see if there was vetiver in this fragrance as well. There is vetiver. And so there's vetiver and patchouli in the base. Now, vetiver and patchouli in the base are two ingredients that modern perfumers use to mask the fact that there is no oak moss. They almost use it as a trick, a subterfuge, right? They're trying to hide the fact that there's no oak moss, or they're trying to trick you into thinking there's oak moss when there's not. And in the modern formula, that is the way that patchouli and vetiver is used. It's used as a base, a fixative, a way to kind of give off that oak moss vibe, even though it can't, because this fragrance can't exist without oak moss. Not in this form, not in the vintage form. Oak moss is such an integral part of the fragrance's DNA that if you remove it, the fragrance is completely different. These are completely different fragrances, right? The modern and the vintage. Now, that being said, they do start to get a little closer together as the hours tick by. So it's 12:55. I put this on at 8 in the morning, okay? And 12:55, 8 to 8 in the morning, it's been on my skin for a while. And I can tell you that about the 3-hour mark is when they really start getting a little bit closer. They're still different, but I think because the patchouli and the base and all that good stuff comes out here, you know, the vetiver starts working and giving off that vibe, that oak moss vibe. This is definitely less sweet. It's harder to wear. It's more challenging. If you're somebody who is like me and you're a collector, and you're a collector not just because you want to flex on people, but because you really love fragrances and you want to break them down and you want to understand them and talk about them and stuff like that, get the vintage. The vintage is very interesting. This is an amazing fragrance. I'm so glad that I have this full bottle, because before I only had this little decant. And so I'm so glad I have a full bottle of the vintage. And you know, it was stored properly, it was unopened, it was unsprayed when I got it, all that good stuff. And so if you're somebody who has a bit of experience and you want to smell something you'll never smell today, even if you go buy a Roja Dove for big money, because even Roja can't put the amount of oak moss that's in this. They can do their tricks with patchouli and vetiver and make you think this or that, but the amount of oak moss that's in this will never be recreated under IFRA. You'll have to go to a indie. You'll have to go to an indie brand like Rogue Perfumery or something like that, Meleg or whatever it is. If you're a beginner and you want to get an imprint of what the past looked like, an easier to wear imprint without the rooty, vegetal, animalic. There is something a little animalic to this vintage. There's no castoreum, there's no civet listed, but there is leather in the base. There's balsam fir, there's tarragon, there's rosemary, stuff like that, cloves, patchouli, leather, oak moss. It does give off that yataghan, rooty, vegetal feel, like I said. So for the more experienced noses, this. But for the less experienced noses, pick up a bottle of this first and see how it does. If you like that sweeter, honeyed vibe, and you maybe want to try something special, because this is special now. There's not very many people that are going to be able to find, these bottles, unsprayed, well-kept, in the original condition. And so if you're ready to take the next step, you could always start here and then go here. That's why I say both of them, you have to applaud the House of Bijan for keeping this still going, although it is very different, especially when you do a side-by-side. So this is one I didn't have to worry about whether my nose would be able to distinguish between the two, because there are vast differences, vast. And this is a great example of why I am the way I am when I collect perfume, why I'm so interested in the older versions, why I'm so interested in the vintage, because, when you do a side-by-side comparison, you realize just how different one distributor is to another. I hear people all the time say, oh, I just hear these people make a stink online about the first fragrances and the first version and this and that or whatever, and they just want to increase the price of their bottles so they can sell them for a profit. That's complete BS. That is somebody who has never done a side-by-side comparison. Because if they had, I can guarantee you that they would be saying the same thing I'm saying right now, if they're honest, if they're not, basically bought by the brands to say, no, these are the same. Come on, no one would ever tell the difference. No. So that's why I'm doing these fragrances, these fragrance reviews this way, because I want to share this info with you guys. There's very few people that, A, have the knowledge, B, have the juice. I mean, you have to have the different versions of the juice to do the comparison. You have to have the drive to actually do these videos, because for years I had the juice. For years I could have done videos, but I never did. I just started doing videos at the end of last year because Rich Mitch egged me on. He really pushed me to do it, and then I found out that I actually enjoy doing it. So that's why you get so much fluff online. You've got to fight through. And I hope for the real frag heads, for the people who really love fragrances, that this video is helpful. I know this is the kind of content that I would like to watch if I'm hunting down content on YouTube. I've said it before, I'll say it again, a like and a subscription definitely helps. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm not here for, I'm not doing this to become YouTube famous or to make money or to, get free bottles or any of that. I've got my own bottles I bought with my own money. I don't need the free bottles from the brands. And that makes me a free man to be able to say whatever I want because I paid the money for it. I'm not worried about the brands cutting off my supply and, that I'm not beholden to them. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers because once I have 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to drop my top 100 favorite fragrances to wear list ranked. I've never ranked a list before. All of my videos are basically unranked, even though this is not a top 10. This is not a top 10 leather. This is not a top 10 tobacco. By the way, speaking of videos from the past, I figured out how to make a playlist. There you go. Highlight of my week. and I put all my videos into playlists, which was an absolute beating because I didn't realize how many there were. But you know, you can go look up the perfumer's portfolio. You can look this year in perfume. You can look up this is not a top 10, first and early impressions, so forth and so on. So I hope that helps kind of go find the videos you're most interested in watching rather than scrolling through the old ones. There are now playlists for the channel. And lastly, I would say do leave a comment below and let me know if you have experience with this fragrance, either the modern or the vintage, if you wore it in the past, if you agree with what I'm saying or disagree. I love seeing your faces down below. I love interacting with you guys. It's one of my favorite parts about doing this. That's why I make time every day to try to do a video. And I'm really enjoying this. Really a great fragrance. Both of these. I really like both of them. Even the more sweeter modern one doesn't have that synthetic sweetness I was complaining about yesterday when I was doing Dior's Ombre Nuit. That synthetic molecule sweetness that was going on in that fragrance isn't in even the modern version. So applaud to 5-Star Fragrances and Bijan for keeping this classic going. If you think that, you know, this is, hopefully this shines a spotlight on a fragrance that is very under the radar. People think it's a cheapie because it's 18 bucks or whatever. You know, I will tell you the vintage is worth it. It definitely is for the money you're paying, especially since there's limited supply of these vintage bottles floating around. So I hope that's helped some folks. Thanks again for watching, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. And I will be back tomorrow with another video. Cheers. Bye, guys.